Let me ask you something uncomfortable. You've been training for months. You've put in the miles. You've done the long runs. You've sacrificed weekends, early mornings, social events. And yet, when race day comes, you blow up somewhere around mile 18 and spend the last 8 miles in what can only be described as a slow, painful death march. Sound familiar? Yeah, I thought so. And here's the thing. It's not your fitness that failed you. It's your pace. And before you say, I know I went out too fast, no, you don't actually know, because if you did, you wouldn't keep doing it. So today, we're fixing that. For real this time. If you've been following this series, you already know we've been building you up from the ground. Aerobic base, recovery habits, training structure, all of it. This episode is where that foundation either pays off or falls apart. We're talking about pace, specifically marathon pace. How to find it, how to hold it, and how to stop sabotaging yourself on the one day that actually matters. And I'm going to give you something most running content never does. Brutal honesty wrapped in a strategy that actually works. Drop a comment right now and tell me. Have you ever blown up in a marathon? I guarantee I'm not the only one asking. But first, if this is your first time here, subscribe. Because what we're building in this series is not just fitness, it's a complete transformation of how you think about running. And you're going to want to be here for every chapter of this. All right, let's talk about what's actually going wrong. Here's the real problem. Most runners, recreational runners, the kind who train consistently, who care about their performance, who are not just casually jogging, most of them have absolutely no idea what their marathon pace feels like. None. They know their goal time. They've done the math. They know that to run a 4-hour marathon, they need to hold roughly 9 minutes and 9 seconds per mile. Great. They know the number. But on race day, when the crowd is roaring, the adrenaline is spiking, the weather is perfect, and everyone around them is taking off like they're being chased, that number disappears. It evaporates. And they just run by feel. And by feel, I mean by crowd pace, by excitement, by the lie their body tells them when everything feels easy in the first 3 miles. You know what feels like marathon pace in mile 2? Fast, confident, effortless. You know what feels like marathon pace in mile 20? Like your legs are made of concrete and someone replaced your lungs with wet paper bags. That's not drama, that's physiology, and ignoring it is why you keep having terrible second halves. Here's something that almost nobody admits out loud. The majority of amateur marathon runners have never actually trained at their goal marathon pace. They do their easy runs easy. They do their long runs at a comfortable shuffle. They do their speed workouts fast. But that specific zone, that precise, disciplined, uncomfortable, but sustainable pace that is marathon race pace, they almost never practice it in training. And then they expect to hold it for 26.2 miles on race day. Think about that. You've never taught your body what that pace feels like under fatigue. You've never practiced running it at mile 15 of a long run when your glycogen is dropping and your form is breaking down. But you're going to nail it on race day? Be honest with yourself. This is where the real problem lives. Not in your training volume, not in your VO2 max, not in your gear. In the fact that your marathon pace is theoretical, not physical. It lives in a spreadsheet, not in your muscle memory. Now let me guess what's going through your head right now. But I did a tune-up race, and I felt good. Okay. A half marathon 3 weeks before your marathon tells you something, but it doesn't tell you everything. Race conditions are different. Adrenaline is different. Your taper is different. Feeling good in a shorter race does not mean you've internalized your marathon pace. It means you ran fast and felt okay. That's not the same thing. But I ran with a pace group and they went out too fast. Did they? Or did you just feel like they did? Because you were nervous and uncertain. Pace groups exist precisely because runners don't trust themselves. And even then, many runners fall apart in the second half, not because the pace group was wrong, but because they never trained their body to sustain that effort for 6, 7, 8 hours of total time on feet. The pace group was never your problem. Your preparation was. But I trained by heart rate, and I stayed in the right zone. Heart rate training is valuable. I've talked about this before in this series, but here's what nobody tells you. Marathon race day heart rate is not the same as training heart rate. Adrenaline, crowd energy, heat, dehydration, all of it pushes your heart rate higher than it would be in a quiet training run at the same pace. If you train to stay at 150 and you hit 155 in mile 1 on race day, you're not going to slow down. You're going to convince yourself it's fine. And then you're going to pay for it in mile 22. Stop hiding behind your tools, the watch, the heart rate monitor, the training plan. They're only as useful as your ability to translate them into physical reality on race day. And that translation only happens through deliberate, repeated practice at exactly that pace. Full stop. So here's what actually works, and I'm going to be specific because vague advice is worthless. First, you need to define your honest goal pace, not your dream goal pace. There's a difference. Your dream pace is based on who you want to be. Your honest pace is based on the training you actually did, the long runs you actually completed, and the fitness you actually have right now. If your longest long run was 18 miles at a 10:30 pace and you're hoping to race at 9:30, there is a gap in your plan. That gap will find you. Use a reliable predictor, a recent half marathon time, a recent 10-mile race, and calculate from there. Not from hope, from data. Second, you need to run marathon pace efforts in training. Specifically, I'm talking about what coaches call marathon pace work. Segments inside your long run where you practice running at goal race pace under fatigue. Not the whole long run, just portions of it. 4 miles. At marathon pace, after you've already been running for an hour, 6 miles at marathon pace in the middle of a 16-mile long run. This is how you teach your body, not your brain, your body, what that effort actually feels like when you're tired. This is how you build pace memory, and pace memory is what saves you on race day when the adrenaline is screaming at you to go faster. Third, learn to run even splits or a negative split. This is not revolutionary advice, but it's advice that most runners hear and then completely ignore on race day. An even split means running the first half and the second half at the same pace. A negative split means running the second half slightly faster than the first. Almost every major marathon world record in history has been run as a negative split or nearly perfect even split. The fastest times in the world are not set by going out hard and hanging on. They're set by controlled, disciplined patience in the first half. If you finish a marathon and your second half was more than 4 or 5 minutes slower than your first half, you went out too fast. It's that simple. Commit to starting slower than you think you need to. Commit to it before you get to the start line. Make it a rule. The first 6 miles should feel almost embarrassingly easy. If they don't, you're already making a mistake. Fourth, practice the mental discipline of slowing down in the first mile. This sounds simple. It is not simple. In a race with thousands of other runners, with spectators screaming your name, with months of anticipation bubbling over, slowing down is one of the hardest things you will ever do as a recreational runner. It feels wrong. It feels like you're wasting the good feeling. It feels like you're being left behind. But those runners blowing past you in mile 3, find them in mile 20. The race does not start until mile 20. Everything before that is just getting to the starting line. Here's what I want you to really sit with for a second. The marathon is not a test of how fast you can run. It's a test of how well you can manage effort over time. That's it. Every single blow-up you've ever had, every time you've fallen apart in the back half of a race, every death march you've suffered through, it started with a pace decision you made in the first 10 kilometers, not in the last 10, in the first 10. You made the mistake before most spectators even had a second cup of coffee. The good news? That's fixable. It's completely, entirely fixable. Not through talent, not through more mileage, through awareness, discipline, and the willingness to run your race instead of everyone else's race. Your pace, your plan, your finish line. And look, we've been building toward this moment since we started this series. You've worked on your base. You've worked on your recovery. You've built the engine. Now it's about learning to drive it. And pace is the steering wheel. The miles are already in your legs. Now it's time to be smart about how you use them. You're further along in this journey than you were 3 episodes ago. I hope you feel that. Because you are. Every video in this series has been laying groundwork, and what we're building right now, this conversation about pacing, this is what separates runners who finish races feeling decent from runners who feel destroyed. You're making the right choice by being here. Now, here's what's coming next. You've been thinking about the marathon. Maybe you've run one. Maybe you're training for one right now. But a lot of runners, a lot of you watching this, start somewhere else. You start with the half marathon, and the half marathon has its own trap. A trap so specific, so common, and so avoidable that it almost makes me angry how many people fall into it without ever being warned. The next episode is about the single biggest mistake that half marathoners make. And it is not the mistake you think it is. I've seen it destroy race days for runners who were in the best shape of their lives, fit, prepared, undertrained in exactly the wrong way, and they didn't even know it until they were standing at mile 10 wondering why their legs suddenly stopped cooperating. You do not want to miss that one, especially if a half marathon is anywhere in your near future. Subscribe if you haven't already. Hit the notification bell because I want to make sure you actually see it when it drops, and tell me down in the comments, what is your goal? Marathon or half marathon pace? And have you ever actually trained at that pace in your long runs? Because I have a feeling that comment section is going to be very revealing. Let's hear it.